Have you ever heard of a gardening method so effective that it wasn't banned because it failed, but because it worked a little too well?
Back in the mid-1800s, farmers across Europe and America stumbled onto something remarkable. Land that had been dry, tired, and unproductive suddenly sprang back to life. Fields that once struggled began yielding 2 or even 3 times their usual harvest. For families who depended on every sack of grain, it felt like a miracle.
And yet, this powerful method was eventually outlawed. It was labeled unsanitary, old-fashioned, even dangerous. Not because it didn't deliver results, but because it did. It challenged the rise of industrial agriculture and the growing fertilizer industry. Here's the surprising part. The core idea behind this forgotten practice still makes sense today. With modern science and safe handling, gardeners are rediscovering it, and in some cases, seeing results that rival or even outperform compost alone.
So if you've ever wrestled with stubborn clay soil or felt impatient waiting months for compost to mature, stay with me. By the end, you'll understand how this once forbidden method can be adapted safely in your own backyard and why it remains so powerful.
A look back in time. Let's rewind to the 19th century.
It was a period of massive change. Populations were booming. Cities were swelling, farmland was being pushed harder than ever, and keeping soil fertile was becoming a serious challenge. Farmers needed something dependable, affordable, and effective to restore their fields.
That's when many turned to a solution that sounds shocking today, something known as night soil.
Despite the name, the idea wasn't new. In fact, it had been used for centuries across Asia, particularly in China, Korea, and Japan. Farmers collected human waste, carefully aged or treated it, and returned it to the land. It was a complete nutrient cycle. What came from the soil eventually went back to it.
Historians often point out that this closed-loop system helped keep Chinese farmland productive for thousands of years without synthetic fertilizers. In Japan's Edo period, human waste was so valuable that it was bought and sold. Wealthy households could sell theirs to merchants who transported it to rural farms. Some farmers even competed for contracts in certain neighborhoods because the supply was considered essential for strong harvests. Europe had its own version of the system. By the 1800s, cities like London were overcrowded, and waste disposal had become a pressing issue. Enter the night soil men. Under cover of darkness, they emptied chamber pots and cesspools, carting the waste outside city limits to nearby farms. Once applied to fields, the results were dramatic. Soil that had been depleted became rich and productive again. Crops fertilized this way often outperformed those fed with animal manure or compost. Farmers reported thicker grain heads, healthier vegetables, and harvests that exceeded expectations. For many communities, this wasn't just fertilizer, it was survival. It could mean the difference between scarcity and abundance. But not everyone saw it that way. Why it was banned? If the method worked so well, why was it eventually outlawed? The reasons had less to do with farming and more to do with public health and politics. As cities grew denser during the 1800s, sanitation became a serious crisis. Picture the crowded streets of London, Paris, or New York, where thousands relied on chamber pots and poorly managed cesspools. When waste wasn't handled properly, it seeped into rivers, wells, and drinking water supplies. The consequences were devastating. Outbreaks of cholera, typhoid, and dysentery swept through urban neighborhoods, claiming countless lives. Public opinion shifted quickly.
While farmers valued the fertilizer, city residents and officials began to associate human waste with disease and danger. What had once sustained farmland was now viewed as a public health threat. Governments responded by building large-scale sewage systems designed to move waste away from cities entirely, out of sight and out of mind. Instead of being recycled into farmland, nutrients were flushed into rivers and oceans. At the same time, a new industry was emerging. By the late 1800s, Chilean nitrate deposits were being mined and exported around the world. Then, in the early 1900s, the Haber-Bosch process made it possible to produce synthetic nitrogen on a massive industrial scale. For the first time, fertilizer could be manufactured in factories, packaged neatly, and sold commercially. Industrial agriculture was on the rise, and the old nutrient cycle was left behind. For the first time ever, fertilizer didn't have to come from a farm. It could come from a factory. It was packaged, predictable, easy to use, and incredibly profitable. Chemical companies moved quickly to promote this new solution. Compared to neat, bagged fertilizer, traditional waste-based farming was painted as primitive, dirty, and even hazardous. The pitch was straightforward. Why deal with something messy and uncertain when you can buy a clean, convenient product off the shelf? And it worked. Farmers gradually stepped away from night soil, not because it stopped producing results, but because the cultural and scientific spotlight had shifted. By the early 1900s, a method that had nourished civilizations for generations had nearly disappeared from Western agriculture. Something once essential was now dismissed as outdated. Yet one important fact never changed. When managed properly, it was one of the most powerful soil-building tools ever used. Why it was so effective. Here's the interesting part. Even while regulations tightened and bans spread, many farmers and researchers quietly acknowledged how effective it truly was. Consider human urine. Fresh and handled correctly, it contains nitrogen levels comparable to many store-bought fertilizers today. Beyond nitrogen, it also provides phosphorus and potassium, key nutrients plants need, in forms that roots can absorb almost immediately. It's easy to see why it earned the nickname liquid gold.
Now compare that to compost.
Compost is fantastic for long-term soil health. It improves structure, boosts moisture retention, and supports beneficial microbes. But it works gradually. It can take months to break down, and nutrients are released slowly over time. That slow release is excellent for building resilient soil, but it doesn't deliver the same quick surge of nutrients that diluted urine or properly aged night soil can provide. In fact, some 19th century farming publications openly stated that urine could outperform compost because it fed crops exactly when they needed it most. For a small family farm trying to survive, that timing could mean the difference between scarcity and abundance. This wasn't just theory. In parts of Asia, where nutrient recycling continued for centuries, soils remained productive across generations. Meanwhile, in regions that shifted heavily towards synthetic fertilizers, yields often spiked quickly, but were followed by soil depletion, creating cycles of rapid growth and decline. Modern studies echo similar findings. Trials comparing urine-based fertilizers with commercial products have shown similar and sometimes better results for crops like leafy greens, corn, and brassicas. And when urine is used alongside compost, the benefits multiply. Fast-acting nutrients combined with lasting organic matter.
So while compost remains a cornerstone of healthy gardening, the truth is that this once banned method offered a level of rapid plant response that few alternatives could match. That's why so many farmers trusted it, even as policymakers tried to phase it out.
A safer way forward. Of course, no one is suggesting we return to 19th century sanitation practices. Hauling raw waste from homes would be unsafe and unacceptable by today's health standards. But what if we focused on the principle instead of the past practice? That's exactly what modern gardeners and soil scientists are doing. They're exploring how to recycle nutrients responsibly, capturing the benefits without the health risks that once caused concern. One of the simplest approaches is diluted urine fertilizer. When fresh, urine is naturally sterile. Mixed with water, typically about 1 part urine to 10 parts water, it becomes an effective, fast-acting liquid feed. Many gardeners use it successfully on nutrient-hungry plants like corn, cabbage, and tomatoes. For seedlings or potted plants, a gentler 1:20 ratio works well. The key is simple. Apply it to the soil rather than the leaves, and vary where you pour it to prevent nutrient buildup in one area. Another option is properly managed composting toilet systems, sometimes called humaner systems. While the idea may sound unconventional, it's already being used in various parts of the world. When composted at high temperatures for at least a year, harmful pathogens are eliminated. What remains is dark, earthy humus, similar in appearance and smell to traditional compost, but often richer in nutrients. In other words, the goal isn't to go backward. It's to combine old wisdom with modern safety standards, creating smarter, cleaner ways to close the nutrient loop and care for our soil. Across the world, off-grid communities, eco-villages, and regenerative farms are quietly proving that these systems can work beautifully. What was once treated as waste is now being transformed into something valuable, a resource that restores soil instead of polluting waterways. And it's not just small communities experimenting. In Vermont, programs like the Rich Earth Institute's Pea Cycling Initiative are taking this idea to a larger scale. Volunteers donate their urine, which is then sanitized, processed, and returned safely to farmland. The results? Strong crop yields, reduced fertilizer costs, and far less dependence on synthetic chemicals. Now imagine if more towns and cities followed that lead. We could rely less on mined phosphorus, cut back on chemical runoff, and rebuild healthier soils from the ground up. The real takeaway here is balance. Compost still plays a vital role. It builds soil structure, improves moisture retention, and supports the living ecosystem beneath our feet. But when you combine compost's steady, long-term nourishment with the quick boost of diluted urine, you create a powerful partnership, feeding plants in the present while strengthening the soil for the future. This isn't about going backward. It's about blending time-tested wisdom with modern science to garden in ways that are cleaner, safer, and more sustainable. Practical tips for seniors. Let's bring this back to the home garden. If you're an older adult who enjoys gardening, you might be wondering, how can I apply this safely and simply? The encouraging news is that you don't need complicated systems, heavy lifting, or fancy tools. A watering can, some water, and a bit of confidence are enough to begin. Here's how to ease into it comfortably. Start small. If the idea feels unfamiliar, try it on just one raised bed or a few container plants. Mix fresh urine at roughly 1 part to 10 parts water and apply it around heavy feeding plants like tomatoes, corn, or squash. Within weeks, you'll likely notice deeper green leaves and more vigorous growth. Always dilute. This step matters.
Undiluted urine is too concentrated and can damage roots, especially in pots. A 1 to 10 ratio works well for most plants, while 1 to 20 is gentler for seedlings and containers. When unsure, simply add more water.
Rotate where you apply it. Avoid pouring it in the same spot week after week. Move around your garden to keep nutrients evenly distributed, similar to rotating crops. Pair it with mulch or carbon materials.
If you use straw, dry leaves, or wood chips, apply your diluted solution over them. The carbon helps absorb nitrogen, reducing nutrient loss and making it available to plants for longer.
Choose the right time of day.
Apply during the cooler hours, early morning or evening. This reduces evaporation and gives plants time to take in nutrients without stress. It's also easier on you, especially during hot weather.
Keep compost as your foundation.
Think of compost as your garden's daily nourishment, steady and reliable. Diluted urine is more like a supplement that gives plants an extra boost. Together, they create healthy balance.
Follow safety practices.
If exploring composting toilet systems, always follow proper guidelines. Wear gloves, maintain high compost temperatures, and allow at least a full year before use. Responsible handling is what makes the practice safe and sustainable.
One added benefit, especially for seniors, is how physically manageable this approach is. There are no heavy fertilizer bags to haul around, no strenuous work, just a light watering can and a gentle walk through your garden.
And the rewards are meaningful. Stronger plants, better harvests, and the quiet satisfaction of using resources wisely.
For many of us, gardening isn't only about food. It's about staying active, feeling connected to nature, and experiencing joy in simple routines. By using this approach, you're not just nourishing plants, you're participating in a cycle that has sustained life for centuries.
A final thought.
So what does this story really teach us? It reminds us that nature operates in cycles. Nothing is wasted. Fallen leaves, rainwater, organic scraps, everything feeds something else. It's a beautiful, balanced system.
When modern agriculture disrupted that cycle, sending nutrients down drains and replacing them with synthetic products, we didn't just lose fertility, we lost resilience, we lost balance, and perhaps we lost a little connection to the natural world.
But as home gardeners, we can rebuild that connection. With compost piles, cover crops, mulch, and even a simple watering can, we can close the loop in our own backyards. We can reduce dependence on store-bought fertilizers and nourish our soil in ways that feel thoughtful and responsible.
Maybe this message resonates even more deeply later in life. With age comes perspective. We understand patience. We appreciate wisdom. And we know the value of making use of what we already have rather than throwing it away.
The farmers of the 1800s may have been prevented from continuing this practice, but today we can adapt it safely and intelligently. And in doing so, we rediscover a simple truth. Real fertility doesn't come from a plastic bag. It comes from respecting the natural cycles of life. If this perspective sparked something in you, share it with another gardener who enjoys learning new and old ideas. And if you'd like more practical, timeless gardening insights reimagined for today's backyard, stay connected. Because healthy soil is living soil, and when we care for it wisely, it will continue to care for us, our families, and the generations that follow.